Welcome to today's Flex webinar. I'm your host, Marcus Merritt. Today, we're going to talk about the fetch update. This is coming out into the patch that was just recently happened, 0.27.44. There's actually a lot of really good other things in that patch, so I highly recommend you look at the patch notes, take a peek at it. But this fetch change is a big change to the way that Flex is working on how your availability is loading. And so we wanted to get a chance to get as much out there to people, let them know about it, let them ask questions, see what we can do to follow up on that. So we're going to focus on that for today, and some of these other features I will hit in future webinars. Okay. So first, I want to spend a little bit of time explaining a little bit about why on this. Now, the first thing I want to highlight is that in Flex 4, in the legacy product, the availability calls were managed in a very different way because the browser had very little control of what was going on. Everything was through the Flash player and through the Flash app that we had programmed. And so it was more on the constraints of Flash. That was really what was adjusting on how fast availability could load and any other problems with that. In bringing this over to Flex 5 and processing through HTML5, we are now leaning on the browser to process things. And at first, everything seemed fine, and we then started to find some issues and looked into things and found a little better what was causing those issues, and have made this update to help solve that and smooth things out for people. Okay, so I want to explain those issues first real quick, and then we'll get into some demonstration of what it is. So first here, the key thing I want to highlight is that in communicating from your browser on your laptop, your desktop, to the server in the cloud, there is a limit of every modern browser, and I say this as basically Chrome, Firefox, Edge, Safari, all if updated versions say they have a limit of 6 concurrent connections to the server. Okay, that's 6 simultaneous connections. Okay, now it's important to note that a lot of connections, a lot of calls when it's requesting information from the server are very quick. And that 6 limit is really not a factor because the information is requested and pulled back very quickly. You're not even going to notice it. Okay. But availability calls are much bigger, complicated calls. They have to get a lot of information sorted on the back end of the server before they can pull that number to help communicate to you on your availability, good or bad, what's exactly the number for that. That can cause those to take a bit longer. And so if they're in the call and they're connected, it may actually take multiple seconds, and that will then be able to stop up and slow down other calls. Okay, so we see that 6 concurrent connections. Now, the next thing to make it so when we're checking availability, we don't do it so every single call is its own request. We bulk them into sets of 10 so that we can keep those kind of limited on the amount of sets of availability calls. But that still means if we have a 100-line quote, you're going to have 10 sets of availability calls that go out when you first switch from the header to the detail block page and go to load that information. Okay. Now the browser says that's too many. I can't do that. So it's going to let 6 of those calls go through, and it's going to queue up the other 4 of those. It's going to put them into a queue to say when these other calls are done, then I'll process those. Okay. If while you're waiting for those calls, you then decide to go and update a quantity, tweak a price, do any other kind of adjustment, those other interactions with the page are also put in that queue, but the browser throws them to the back of the queue. Even though those are calls that could have been processed quite quickly, they're still waiting behind those availability calls. This makes it so for people with larger quotes, and especially if customers in larger systems, lots of jobs that have more complicated availability calls, it can lag up and slow down your server, your app and your browser, and sometimes even get to the point of lock it up. We have a few of our very large customers that had reported a lot of instances of things just completely locking up, and they have to just fully refresh the browser on this. Okay, and it is because of that concurrent limit of the browser. So that is what this fetch update is all about. This is meant to fix that problem so that we are not leaning on the browser and we're not relying on the browser. Now, the important thing is that limit on the browser, that limit of 6 concurrent calls, that is hard coded. There is nothing we can do about that. So instead, we've had to program around that to make it so we are not putting that pressure on the browser and letting it cause itself to lock up. So let's go ahead and take a peek at the system, and I'll start talking about how this works. Okay, so here's my page. Now, one first thing that I'm going to highlight a little bit of this first. So you'll see here, I'm on this quote here, and that we see that in my conflict column, everything is gray, not red or green, gray, saying I don't have availability yet. It's more similar to the old style if I just had availability off. When I switched from the header over to the detail block, it loaded the lines, but it doesn't even try to chase availability. Okay. Now, first, that actually helps us to keep load down on the server, because if you weren't the person to be concerned about availability, but your experience was good, so you didn't generally bother to turn availability off, well, it doesn't load that information. And if you just needed to print out a new quote, you needed to review, maybe change the quantity of something and then print out an update for your customer, you've not then put that pressure on your server, and that should help the load for everyone, okay? But if instead you need it, we make it instead so you have now this fetch button that you go and request it. Now, I'm going to demo that in just a minute, but I first want to state also that I have this other quote. It's brand new, it's empty. And this is the thing. For a sales guy who's creating a new quote, the experience is not going to feel or seem any different, okay? Because if I go in here and I go find myself some item, I'll go get myself a console here, and I drag and drop that in, you'll see that that fetches the availability immediately. Any new line that is added is going to immediately request that availability for that line. Okay. Also, I'm going to go back over to my other one here. If I go in and update and I have to change a quantity, I say, oh, you know what? I only think I need 8 of these now. Well, the moment I update that quantity, it is going to fetch that. Oh, I've pushed this down to a sheet, so this is going to be bad. I realized I stole this for some other testing I had to do, so I'm going to make a copy of it real quick. Should have double checked that better. My bad. It's the joy of the live webinar. Okay, so in here again, if I go to this guy, we're going to turn it back to a 10. Now we're going to see that it's going to queue and it's going to tell me my availability. Okay, so that's that first thing to note, that if I make any adjustment, I don't have to then go tell it, hey, and tell me what happened. It's going to do it. If I add a new line, if I change a quantity, okay, that's going to happen. In addition to that, you can request an update for a specific item, including virtual items and including subtotals. So I could just go and say, hey, I need to double check. I have a common shortage on my MacBooks. Let me go check this. So I can go to my options menu and say refresh availability, and it's going to queue for just that one item. Okay, and you could even do that if it's here, and then though you've been away for a little bit and you're worried somebody else quoted a bunch of those and you want to go check it again, you can still refresh availability again, even though you have the availability, because it's only checking it at that moment. Okay, same, I can go to this virtual item that has all of these contents, and I can go here and say refresh availability, and you'll see that then it refreshes it for all of the children items as well. And then including here, realizing this is virtual, there's nothing here, but there's my availability for all of those detailed parts and pieces of that content, okay? Also, instead, if I'm just concerned about a specific subtotal, I'm the guy who's in charge of camera and records, and I wanna just chase all of this, I can come to the subtotal and refresh availability, and it will chase that availability of that subtotal and help me to know. But if instead I'm some operations or some, kind of logistics manager, I'm planning all the shortages and I need to come to this quote. Now, one thing I just like to show on this, if for some reason you have to reload. Now, a full reload of the page is going to cause it to lose all of that availability. Basically, it's cached there. And when you do anything to clear the cache, it's going to clear and come back. One of those things can be to hit this refresh button here. That's going to reload, but not availability. Okay? And I just want to show that to see the experience if I have all of my subtotals uncollapsed, right? Pretty much everything's uncollapsed in this, and I decide I need to look through everything. I can go up to the top here and hit fetch, and you're going to see that it's starting to queue, but we're managing the queue. Okay. And one of the important things on this is if the queue is bigger, but then I decide over here, I'm going to change this, that change goes to the front of the line. And so it takes place before it finishes these. Okay. So that if you have other things, it's getting done while that's still kind of being worked on. It's making it so we're not leaning on the browser, and the browser isn't getting that chance to say, hey, you've asked too much of me and I'm just going to lock up. Okay, we are not going to put too much pressure on the browser so that we don't have that problem. Okay, now in the same way here, we see that I've got my availability fetched for these first two, but if now I need to go down farther and I get down here, we see after a little while, we had some lines that they hadn't fetched, but I didn't have to go hit the button anymore. I didn't have to go refresh anything. It just said, hey, that line wasn't even rendered. You couldn't have even looked at it. So I wasn't going to bother to go get it. I'm not going to put pressure on the server for that. But when you scroll and go to load that, I'm going to go ahead and get that information. Okay. Now, the one note with this is that if I clear everything out and I hit fetch and then I scroll real fast, I'm going to skip some of those. And it's not going to have even queued them because they didn't really render. But it is going to then put these ones, you see here that these ones are in the queue and they're going and they're there. But if I then scroll back up, some of those ones that I skipped very fast, they go ahead and queue and then they will be fetched. Okay. So it just does require that if I'm doing a bulk thing of a quote that was already built, but I just opened, or in some way I refreshed the page, I will have to hit that fetch one time. And then as I work through it, and especially if, like I said, you're still having to solve the problem. So you're having to go in here and say, well, I got to go, solve my shortage and run my conflicts. Oh, it's not being happy with me. I will state in this that while we did do, a good check of some things, we have already found a couple bugs, not things that we think are giant or are terrible. But be aware you may find some other bugs. Please, please, please go in, use them. If you see things, report them. We will get them fixed in the next thing. The key is we're having problems with some customers getting that slow system and or locked up system, and we felt we had to get this in as soon as possible. So we wanted to get this in. We know there's going to be some fixes. We will push to get them into the next patch in 2 weeks from now. Unless they even could be bigger stoppers, then we may do a hot fix and do something earlier. We don't think there's anything that will be that bad, but I just kind of want to highlight that. But that's sort of the key here. Like I said, if I get this going and then I start working down my quote to find my shortages and fix them. Okay, now I need to go work on this one. Oh, we got a bug related to that. Well, we will have to see what's up with that. And if that's worse, then I will have to get that fixed because I cannot get my options menu pulled up on these right now. So those are kind of the key things that I wanted to sort of highlight about this, that it shouldn't really change how you're working. It does not change how availability loads, but it is going to change, it changes how it loads. It does not change how it calculates. It's still calculating the same. We're just changing when we're requesting for that data so that you can see and get that data, okay? That's the key thing in there. That's the issue. And so that's what we're kind of updating in this, okay? I completely see it may be that people are going to dig in and start using it, and that's when questions may arise. And so, again, please, 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 if you have questions or problems with this, get that sent to support at flexrentalsolutions.com. Get that back out to us. And let us know, and we will do what we can to answer those questions as quickly as possible. And again, if you find any bugs or issues, we will do what we can to get that fixed as quickly as possible. Thanks everyone so much for attending.